Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Geoff Mosher on a Mosher Monday is here. Eagles-Giants, round 3. Here we go. Saturday night, 8:15 on 97.3 ESPN. We got it for you. Eagles, Giants, round 3, Geoff Mosher, and immediately, last week people said, yeah, Giants, that's the team you want to play. And now here they are, and it feels like people are all of a sudden concerned a little bit by the fact that the Giants won yesterday, and I guess it's how they won the game. I mean, they looked, it was probably one of their better games of the year, but now that this is the matchup, should Eagle fans be legitimately concerned about it?
I think you would be legitimately concerned about any team that you're playing in the second round of the playoffs. If the Vikings had won that game, we'd be talking about, hey, this is a Minnesota Vikings team that by hook or crook has figured out a way to win 12 games in the regular season and then beat the Giants and a hot team at the end of the year in the playoffs and yada, yada. So, I mean, you get to a point now where you're into the second round of the playoffs and the team that you're facing has got to be pretty legit. Doesn't mean that, it's going to be a great game or they're going to win, but clearly the Giants have played better over the last few weeks, few months of the season, and I think health is a big part of that for any playoff team. The Giants are healthier on defense now than they've been since in both times the Eagles played them. Well, the second time they rested starters, but that's obviously a big part of why defensively they're a better team.
What did the Giants do yesterday that maybe they haven't done all year or haven't done most of the year and that they can carry into the Eagles game? Because you saw a couple things I'll throw out your way, and you can maybe expand on it, but 17 carries from Jones. Not that that's rare. He has carried double-digit times. The Eagle game he carried 4 times. Barkley only had 9 carries in the game yesterday. I mean, if I told you they had 9 carries from Barkley, you'd say, well, they lost the game. No, they won that game. I thought a big thing yesterday was they only blitzed 20. I mean, what was John Gannon coaching that game yesterday? They blitzed 22% of the time. So what did you see from them yesterday that maybe has changed and that they can carry into Saturday night?
Yeah, I saw a Giants offense that, much like the Eagles offense saw in week 2 against the Vikings, the Giants offense saw a defense that is going to sit back, play a lot of shell coverages, try to take everything away deep, even though the Giants don't really have too many guys that can beat you deep, and give you a lot of space over the middle, and the Giants worked almost flawlessly their zone read game, their quarterback design run game. And, we talk about this a lot. Daniel Jones is a lot faster than people might realize. And if you go back and look, I think I forget what year it was that he came into the league, 17 or 18. Since he came into the league till now, he's the second leading rusher against the Eagles in that time span, second to Ezekiel Elliott. So, I mean, it's really rare to see a quarterback that's on a rushing list like that. But that just shows you what Jones can do. And we've seen that many times against, the Eagles. And, of course, that huge run he had where the turf tackled him. But it was obviously a big part of their game against the Vikings. Two other things I saw that surprised me. You mentioned Saquon Barkley only ran 9 times for 53 yards. But he had a really nice touchdown run, a 28-yarder. And I thought in general, watching him run, one of the knocks on him was that he doesn't always maintain the best contact balance, that he's more of an athlete than a running back, doesn't always follow the blocks right. But I thought he did a really nice job staying skinny through the hole, getting behind his blocks. He had that one run where he kind of spun away from a tackle, so he showed he can stay on his feet, which he hasn't done a lot of throughout his career. So that was pretty impressive, too. And then the one thing I really got to figure out, and I'll go back to the tape on this, is how did their right tackle, Evan Neal, who's been a turnstile all year long, figure out a way to hold off Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith? That might have won the Giants the game because Daniel Jones was fairly protected in that game. And even though the Vikings defense is soft, they do have some pretty good personnel on the defensive line. But it did not seem like Daniel Jones was under duress nearly as much as a guy should be against a defense. And, of course, he completed 24 of 35 passes.
Assuming Jalen Hurts is not 100%, right, and he's a little bit hampered and maybe just slightly limited, right, not overwhelmingly limited, but slightly limited, Who is a potential X factor for the Eagles, right? Like, is this a Miles Sanders game? Is this an offensive line game? Is this a Dallas Goedert attacking the middle game? How do you see this matchup playing out where, okay, I'm looking at this guy for the Eagles offensively to really have to step up?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, based on what you said, assuming that he's not 100%, but also not, like he was last time on the – I would assume that this Eagles team will again try to come out throwing and take advantage of some of the mismatches that they'll believe that they have in the Giants secondary. The Giants secondary is better because Adoree Jackson came back and Xavier McKinney came back, but I still wouldn't say it's the strongest part of their team. So I would think Dallas Goedert, who did not play, if I'm correct, the first time around, even in that huge win for the Eagles, will be a pretty big factor against the Giants. He did play in the second game, but obviously the Giants didn't play their starters there. So I think him and Devontae Smith, of course, also will probably be a big factor against the Giants' number 2 cornerback. And I do think that the Eagles will look to come out throwing like they have.
You look at the Eagles defensively, if you can give us your insight and any update regarding injuries and then how the matchups will possibly play out. I mean, Isaiah Hodgins, I believe is his name. I don't think many Eagles fans would even know who he is. He had 8 catches, 108 yards, and a touchdown. He only had like 300 yards over the 17-game regular season. I don't know. Is that something that the Eagles should be not worried about but factoring in, or is that just a product of the Vikings being an absolute joke?
Well, you got to credit the Giants, and really this is like the old I know the personnel because I used to be there. Brian Dable came from Buffalo. Isaiah Hodgins was on the Buffalo Bills practice squad even as early as this year. And when the Giants had all those injuries early on, they claimed Hodgins off waiver, or they signed him off the 53, I believe. If it was either a waiver claim or a sign off the practice squad, I don't remember, but I do know he was on the Bills practice squad at one point. So Dable had familiarity with him. And it wound up being a really good, smart signing. And then on top of that, it's kind of funny. Like Darius Slayton was a guy that they would have given away in the offseason or going into the year because they thought they were going to have their rookie Wan'Dale Robinson and Sterling Shepard and other guys being able to like sort of take that. Kadarius Toney was still on the team earlier in the year. They didn't think that there was really going to be a role for Darius Slayton, and here he is catching some pretty important passes for them in playoff games, and he's been another guy who's been a little bit of a nemesis more in the past to the Eagles than like this year. But credit to the Giants and Mike Kafka and Dable. They've come up with a offense that is not exciting. It's not exactly explosive other than the occasional Saquon Barkley run, but it is efficient, and they know how to move the ball and kind of keep the chains. I think what I was really impressed with, and again, we can also say this is a knock on Minnesota's defense, but the Giants converted a decent number of 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 6s, 3rd and 7s against the Vikings, and that shouldn't happen in the playoffs against good teams.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4 from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast. We talked about, Wink Martindale found his inner John Gannon. When they played the Eagles this year, 50% of the times in the 2 games, they blitzed. 50% of the times they blitzed in the 2 games. So does Wink Martindale – now, in those games, statistically speaking, Jalen Hurts was way better against the blitz than he was when they did not blitz. So does Wink Martindale go John Gannon again this week? How does he go after maybe the biggest wild card of these playoffs? Which Jalen Hurts are we getting, and how does Wink Martindale attack him?
I believe that he may not blitz at a 50% clip, but he's not dialing it back down that much. I mean, if you play soft zone against the Eagles and you don't have great secondary personnel, sort of like the Vikings from week 2, then Jalen's going to pick you apart because the offensive line has done a great job of protecting Jalen, especially against 4-man rushes. If anything, there have been some concerns lately about the shape of the offensive line, how Lane Johnson's going to hold up, protection schemes. We've seen some even in the game against the Giants backups, there were some free rushers because of what Martindale was doing that got to Jalen Hurts, and Jalen Hurts got hit. So I don't think Martindale is going to dial it back all that much. I think he's going to try to take advantage of, to see, and he's going to test Lane Johnson with maybe some overloads and just test that offensive line in general. And, when you're playing with house money and nobody expected you to be there and you got nothing to lose, right, you tend to bring your whole arsenal. And I would think that Don Martindale is licking his chops to throw some new blitzes at Jalen Hurts and the Eagles.
Is it fair to say that, and this isn't necessarily a potential knock, but is it fair to say that the Eagles' defense is, predicated on the success of the offense, right? Like if you go through the games in the regular season, there's not a dominating performance where you say, man, defensively the Eagles carried us on that side of the ball. That's why we won the game. It's oftentimes, okay, the offense gets out to an early lead. The offense is in a rhythm. It allows the defense in the front four and the front seven to pin their ears back in the pass rush. Allows the secondary to be a little bit more opportunistic. I guess what I'm getting at is, do we have any concern with the Eagles defensively? And is that more pressure on the Eagles offense to get out to an early lead in the playoffs?
Yeah, I think that it's a fair statement, Ryan. I think that you're talking about the Eagles defense of the second half as opposed to the Eagles defense of the first half played in some close games and they flourished because they turned the ball over at almost a historic rate, creating takeaways at a historic rate. Thanks mostly to C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who was leading the NFL by far in interceptions when he got hurt. Since he got hurt, I believe the Eagles only have 2 interceptions. One of them was Reed Blankenship against Brett Favre. Not Brett Favre, against Aaron Rodgers.
It might have been Favre.
The other, I know, right? The other was Josiah Scott.
He's been prone to throw a few from that Favre.
He has been. The other was Josiah Scott, who's now not even going to be on the field that much for the Eagles because they're going to move. If we're going to get a tell from their season finale, it looks like they'll try to play C.J. Gardner-Johnson in the slot in nickel and dime. So that if you're not creating takeaways and you're playing the style of defense that they play, where you don't mind giving up the nickels and the dimes up the middle, you just keep it close, then what you're doing is allowing the opponent to have a little bit more time of possession and ball control. And if you go look at the Eagles' last 6 or 7 games, they've lost time of possession in 3 or 4 of them, I think. It's much different than it was the first 7 or 8 weeks of the season. So, yeah, then if you're not going to dominate time of possession and turnovers, then you're going to rely on your offense to keep the ball out of the other team's hands. So that's a fair statement. But I do kind of wonder, when you go up against a Giants team that generally doesn't have a great offensive line. Their left tackle is great, but from left guard out to right tackle, it's not so good. I do wonder if that, first half Eagles team is just waiting to come back, waiting to pounce on a quarterback, waiting to jump in front of a ball. C.J. Gardner-Johnson will be back, and we'll see. So if it's still in there, that would be a huge advantage for the Eagles defense.
I want to ask you your opinion on this, Geoff. Yesterday, Giants-Vikings.
I don't have one.
The disparity in talent there in that game and the disparity in talent between Philadelphia and New York.
It's a great question. I think the Eagles have the best 53 in football. I think the closest is the Niners. I think the Giants are not close, to be honest with you. I mean, look, the Eagles have 5 linemen. If they're not all pros or Pro Bowlers, they're alternates for the Pro Bowl. I mean, they have all 5 of those linemen would start for the Giants with the exception of Jordan Mailata, because I think it's fair to say I think Andrew Thomas was an All-Pro, so he was great. And that's no knock on Mailata, who's an alternate. So that right there, defensive line is real. They're good. I mean, Lawrence and Leo Williams, Ojulari, Kayvon Thibodeau is good, but the Eagles are still better and deeper. And then you get into the secondary, the Eagles are better. You get to tight end, the Eagles are better. You get the wide receiver, the Eagles are far better. And of course, the quarterbacks had a way better year as well. So I just don't think it's all that close. Now, that doesn't matter because you can do things schematically, right, to kind of stay into a game or to control some of the factors that are your deficiency. You can scheme around that. And so it doesn't mean just because the Eagles are so much better that they're going to blow them out. But talent for talent, it's really not close.
You look at what Doug Peterson has done in Jacksonville. Is there any added pressure on Nick Sirianni? I know he's not literally feeling any added pressure right now because of Peterson winning this weekend. I think that's just an interesting dynamic and a thought-provoking conversation of Peterson's success and Sirianni still needing to get that playoff success here in Philly.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. I think it's not really on Nick. If anything, I would say it would be on Jeffrey Lurie. It was his decision to fire Doug Peterson and then start over with Nick Sirianni. Now, the only thing is there's no real pressure on an owner because nobody can fire the owner. So if it doesn't work, if Nick loses this playoff game, right, and he's 0-2 and Doug goes on to win the Super Bowl, there's going to be a lot of angry people in Philadelphia, but not Jeffrey Lurie. He's not going anywhere. Right. So, I mean, listen, of course, if they lose this game, then Nick Sirianni is going to get it from the fan base, but he would, whether or not Doug Peterson was in the playoffs, right? So it'll look bad if Peterson continues to go. And even if he makes it to the championship game, if he beats Andy Reid on this weekend, it'll be pretty interesting. But obviously, that was a Jeffrey Lurie decision first and foremost.
One of the things in this game, you mentioned Ryan, the coaching. Brian Daboll, I think, is a big reason why they won that game. I think they were more prepared, and they were the better coach team. We saw it all weekend. I think you saw what happened. Doug Peterson, while they were down 27-0. Those were turnover-based. It wasn't preparation-based. When you look at Daboll versus Sirianni and the Eagles staff versus the Giants staff, kind of break that down a little bit for us.
Well, Mike, to your point about the talent discrepancy between the Giants and the Vikings, or the coaching discrepancy, I think Kevin O'Connell has done a nice job with the Vikings this year. But you look at that Giants coaching staff, and it shows you that coaching matters so much. It's Brian Daboll, it's Mike Kafka. Bobby Johnson is the offensive line coach. He's a really good one. Came over from Buffalo. Their defense coordinator, Wink Martindale, is considered one of the best in the league. Their wide receivers coach, Mike Groh, we all know him here from Philadelphia, where he did a really good job as a wide receivers coach. It wasn't until he was offensive coordinator that he sort of came under scrutiny. But he's there coaching wide receivers, and you can see that those are not elite wide receivers, but they're doing a good job of getting open, making catches, whether it's Hodgins, whether it's Slayton. So they're really well coached, and I think that has made a world of a difference for the Giants, and it's a big reason of why they are the way they are. I don't think anybody looks at the Giants and says, man, that's a really, really talented team there. They have some talented players, no doubt, but I don't think people look at them and say, man, that's a team that's maybe they can win it all this year. I don't think people look at that roster this way.
Should be interesting. It's a Saturday night. It's Eagles, Giants. I don't know, man. This is going to be a wild scene down there. You got all day to tailgate for this game now. I mean, it is going to be Eagles, Giants to the nth degree, man. This is the epic here. The last time, I don't remember, was it the last time they played in the playoffs? Was that the Garcia game, or have they played one other time?
2008, I believe, they beat Minnesota in the first round and then played the Giants in the division. You might check me on that. I thought 2008 was unless I'm confusing that with 2006. My brain's getting as
the
I get
Garcia
older.
year was somewhere in there where Garcia beat them in the playoffs. So I don't know. These two teams, the Eagles beat the Giants in the 08 playoffs. Yeah, so.
Whew. I'm not losing it completely.
It's fun. It's great. It's especially we're at Ocean today, Moshe, and I mean, the place is packed, and they said, I was talking to someone beforehand, and they said this place yesterday was Giant fans because of the holiday today. All the New Yorkers are down here, so this place has been jumping with Giant fans, and it's fun. I love this game. This is my favorite game, Eagles-Giants, and I look forward to talking about it all week with the guys from Inside the Birds. Adam will be here tomorrow. Jeff will be back on Wednesday, and, of course, Eagles-Giants you can hear right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Moshe, appreciate it, bud.
Can I leave you with one quick awesome thought on the note you're talking about how awesome it is?
Sure.
If the Cowboys happen to win tonight, right, and then are able to go to San Francisco and knock them off, you could literally have the Eagles playing the Giants in the divisional round and then the Cowboys in the conference championship. As a journalist, an objective, that to me is amazing. I think that would be unbelievable.
Well, and listen, to have the three NFC East teams be it's still alive, and then next week continue to go. And the amount of juice that would be, and that's one of the things that was worried. I said, if the Eagles played Dallas this week, and the way that Eagle fans look at the Eagles-Cowboy game and beat Dallas, would there be a total letdown the next week? The fact that they don't have to play Dallas possibly until that game, I think is a much better setup.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm rooting for it, man. I think, all roads to the Super Bowl go through the NFC East is a really cool thing.
Yeah, and by the way, we talked about this earlier. If we said you would have to beat Daniel Jones and Brock Purdy to get to the Super Bowl at the beginning of the year, are you signing up for that?
I think most people would sign up for that. Yeah, I think they would.
All right, Moshe, we'll talk to you Wednesday.
Take care, guys. Have a good one.